To the old man, Darius shouted, hoisting a fragile crystal glass into the humid Atlanta air. The amber glow of the living room lamp caught the sheen of sweat and something darker greed gleaming on his face. Happy birthday, Pops. 70. Years walking this earth, and tonight ain't just a milestone. Tonight's the first day of your new life. A life fit for a king. The pop of cheap champagne echoed against the ceiling, striking the old plaster I'd personally patched 32 years ago, when Lorraine was still here to hold the ladder steady. Foam spilled over, running down Darius's hand, my oldest son's hand, the same hands I'd taught to tie his shoes, to throw a football, to shake a man's hand with respect. He let out a loud, braying laugh, the kind that showed too much gum, the kind he always had when he thought he was about to close a deal that would change everything. I sat at the head of the table, my hands clasped tight over the worn tablecloth Lorraine had embroidered before the cancer took her. My fingers were thick, calloused, etched with tiny scars, the map of 50 years spent as an architect's apprentice, turned master craftsman, hauling blueprints and lumber through Georgia heat. These were the hands of a builder. These hands had raised walls to shield my family from storms and built porches when my babies took their first steps. They'd fed 3 children every spoonful of grits when they were sick, wiped away their tears when the world was cruel. But now those hands were shaking Dot. It wasn't age. It wasn't joy. It was a coldness that started at the base of my spine and seeped into my marrow, even though it was a sweltering July evening in Cascade Heights. "Drink up, Pops," Kaisha said, pressing a glass to my lips. My youngest. The heavy scent of her perfume, something French and expensive, cut through the lingering smell of mildew in the old house. She was smiling, but her eyes were restless, darting between the clock and the window like she was waiting for a train already long overdue. "It's imported bubbly," she added, her voice honey-sweet, but with an edge underneath. "We had to dig deep for this bottle. Because you deserve the best." I took the glass. The bubbling yellow liquid looked more like something from a hospital sample cup than celebration. "Thank you, children," I said, my voice sounding like a wagon wheel grinding over gravel. "But I'm an old soul. I'd rather have a sip of bourbon or a cold Pabst." "For God's sake, Pops," Darius said, clicking his tongue and slamming the bottle onto the table hard enough to make the fake flowers jump. "Don't be so country. You're going to a 5-star facility. People there drink fine wine and eat brie. Nobody drinks that backwoods mess." A 5-star facility. I looked around our family room. The photos had been stripped from the walls, leaving pale rectangular ghosts where they used to hang Lorraine in her Sunday hat, Isaiah on his motorcycle before the accident, all 3 kids at their graduations. In the corner behind the frayed sofa, I saw them. Cardboard boxes, dozens sealed tight with heavy-duty packing tape. On one box, I recognized Kaisha's hurried scrawl, "Pop's old junk. Toss or donate." Turns out, the life of a king they were talking about began by packing my entire existence into garbage boxes. I took a sip of the wine. It was bitter. Bitter as it slid down my throat. You see, the intuition of an old wolf never fails. When a devoted son suddenly appears after 8 years of neglect, bearing gifts and honeyed words, he's almost certainly hiding a knife behind his back or a deed of sale in his pocket. On the cluttered table, surrounded by take-out chicken bones and empty bottles, sat a massive cake. It was ridiculously large for our narrow dining table. The thick white frosting was elaborately decorated to look like a grand building with rows of palm trees and a crystal blue pool. Red letters written in strawberry syrup arched across the top. "Safe travels. Pops, welcome to Golden Horizons." Kaisha opened her laptop and swiveled the screen toward me. "Look at this, Daddy." Her voice was high-pitched, performative. "This is Golden Horizons, just outside Savannah. Fresh air, No traffic, no sirens. Look, your suite has a flat-screen TV, a memory foam mattress imported from Sweden, and 24/7 nursing staff. There's even a ballroom dance club for seniors on Saturdays. On the screen, silver-haired people in designer clothes were laughing over cocktails. They looked nothing like me. I looked down at my own clothes, a flannel shirt with a frayed collar and slacks shiny at the knees from years of wear. "It looks real nice," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But it must cost a fortune, baby girl." Darius thumped his chest, dropping crumbs onto the floor. "Quality costs, Pops. 5,000 a month. Kaisha had to sell some jewelry, and I had to call in favors just to cover the deposit on a 5-year platinum package. But it don't matter long as you're taken care of. $5,000. The number bounced around my head. With that money, I could fix the leaking roof, buy Isaiah a brand new electric wheelchair, and live comfortably for a whole year. I turned my head toward the darkest corner of the room, where the light from the chandelier couldn't reach. There sat Isaiah, my youngest son. He was 35 years old, but his mind had been stalled at age 3 since that horrific motorcycle accident 10 years ago. His head slumped to one side, propped up by a dingy neck pillow. A thin trail of saliva ran from the corner of his mouth onto the bib I'd put on him that afternoon. Nobody offered Isaiah a piece of cake. Nobody wiped his mouth. Darius and Kaisha didn't even look his way. To them, Isaiah didn't exist. He was just a piece of broken furniture they couldn't sell. And what about Isaiah? I asked, my eyes fixed on my youngest boy. If I go off on this vacation, who's going to watch him? Who's going to turn him every 2 hours so his skin doesn't break out in sores? Who's going to blend his meals and feed him spoonful by spoonful? The room went dead silent. The only sound was the rhythmic clicking of the ceiling fan. Darius and Kaisha exchanged a look I knew too well, the look of accomplices. "Oh, don't you worry about that, Pops," Kaisha said, waving a hand dismissively. Her smile hardened like plaster. "We've got it all figured out. If you're gonna rest, Isaiah needs professional care too. We contacted a state-run facility outside Augusta. They've got equipment and doctors." "State facility," I interrupted. "You mean that warehouse on the edge of town where they leave patients on floors and the smell of bleach can't hide the stench of neglect?" "Don't say that, Pops," Darius snapped, his face flushing. "That's the best place for his condition. He doesn't even know where he is. It don't matter to him. What matters is you. You sacrificed your whole life. It's time you lived for yourself." He paused, then said the word that would change everything. "Isaiah, he's a burden. We can't take care of both of you at the same time." A burden. That word was a dagger straight to my heart. I looked at Isaiah. His eyes were vacant, but at the sound of his brother shouting, he flinched. Somehow, his broken soul still felt the sting of his own blood's contempt. I balled my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. Damn them. They wanted to lock me in a luxury prison to keep the neighbors from talking, and toss their brother into the trash to get rid of the problem. And all for what? For this house, a 3-story Victorian on a valuable lot in Cascade Heights that was appreciating every single day. "Eat some cake, Pops," Kaisha said, cutting a huge slice. The part of the frosting with the image of golden horizons was shredded under her knife. "It's too sweet," I said, looking at the plate. It wasn't sweet. It smelled like rot. The air in the room was so thick I could hardly breathe. The mix of champagne, cheap perfume, and hypocrisy created an invisible stench. "I need to use the restroom," I said, rising with difficulty. I feigned a limp, hunching my back like a senile old man. I needed them to believe I was weak. An old wolf knows when to hide his teeth. "Need help, Pops?" Kaisha asked, her seat firmly planted in her chair. I can manage. Y'all keep eating. I shuffled toward the hallway leading to the kitchen and bathroom, but I didn't go inside. I pressed myself against the doorframe in the dark, where the light from the living room couldn't reach. I sharpened my ears. As soon as my back disappeared, the laughter died. God, Darius hissed, his voice sounding like a snake spitting venom. Why is the old man so slow? He's driving me crazy. Keep it down, Kaisha whispered. But he bought it. Did you see his eyes when he saw the cake? Old people love to be pampered. It was easy. I don't have time for easy, Darius muttered. I heard impatient footsteps on the hardwood. Then a phone rang, an insistent, annoying ringtone. Hello? Darius's voice changed completely. It was shaking, terrified, dropping to a frantic plea. Mr. Vance? Yes, sir. I know. Today's the deadline. Please don't send anyone to the house. For God's sake, Mama's already gone. It's just the old man left. I held my breath, pressing against the wall. Vance. That was a name whispered in pool halls and back alleys. A high-stakes loan shark. The kind of man who gave you two options. Pay up or disappear. I swear to you, Darius continued, his voice cracking like he was about to cry. Tomorrow morning. Just tomorrow. The old man's signing the papers tonight. I got the deed in my hand. Tomorrow I go to the bank, release the funds. It'll be in your account before lunch. No, please don't cut my fingers off. I'm begging you. If I don't pay, you can come for me. Yes, I promise. The call ended. Then a thud. He must have kicked the table or thrown his phone. Did he threaten you? Kaisha asked, her voice just as shaky. He said if he doesn't have the cash by tomorrow, he's putting me in a crate and dropping me in the Chattahoochee, Darius panted. And you ain't safe either. That capital you borrowed for your salon, that was his money too. Then we gotta move fast, Kaisha hissed. Soon as he comes back to the table, you make him sign everything. Don't let him get stubborn about Isaiah. Once he signs, call the transport. Have them take him tonight, if possible. I stood frozen in the darkness. The blood in my veins felt like it had turned to ice. Lord have mercy, God. It wasn't that they cared about my hard work. It wasn't that they wanted me to rest. They were selling me. They were selling the father who raised them and the brother who shared their blood, just to save their own miserable, cowardly lives. They had blown everything on parties and pretense. And now their only life jacket was this house, the sweat and tears of my entire life. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as if someone had reached in to crush my old heart. The pain of betrayal was worse than death. But then that pain shifted into something else. Something colder, harder. I heard Isaiah moan in the living room. Maybe he was thirsty. Or maybe he was scared. That weak sound snapped me out of my daze. If I signed those papers and went to that fake paradise, they would throw Isaiah into the streets. He would die slowly in some filthy corner, alone and in pain. No, not on my watch. I might be an old countryman in their eyes, but I have never been a fool. I am Jerome Washington, the man who survived Atlanta's hardest winters and raised 3 kids with nothing but my bare hands and Loren's prayers. I took a deep breath, swallowed my tears, and straightened my collar. I wasn't going to unmask them yet. If I made a scene, the debt collectors would come and tear this house apart. Me, Isaiah, and them, we'd all go down together. I needed a different plan. A plan more ruthless, but more just. I stepped into the bathroom and flushed the toilet loudly to drown out my last sob. When I walked back out, I was no longer the father who loved blindly. I was the judge. I stood before the sink, leaning on the cold porcelain. The mirror was spotted with age, reflecting a face I hardly recognized. My skin sagged, etched with deep furrows like dried earth. My hair was a thin white cloud. This was Jerome Washington at 70 years old. Remembered my reflection from 30 years ago. Back then, my hair was jet black and thick as a horse's mane. My shoulders were broad, carrying 2x4s up to the 3rd floor without losing my breath. Back then, Lorraine was still alive. Jerome. I thought I heard her whisper in my ear, a soft voice smelling of cinnamon and fresh laundry. Promise me, old man, no matter what happens, make sure the children don't want for anything. Don't let them suffer like we did. I kept my word, Lorraine, I whispered to my reflection. I worked like a beast from dawn to dusk. I didn't buy new clothes. I didn't go to the doctor when my back screamed, just so they could go to private schools and wear nice things. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe you would have been tougher on them. Maybe a mother's love is firmer than a father's. I looked at my hands again. Crooked fingers, thick nails stained dark by decades of work. Darius had the soft hands of an office worker, even though he'd been unemployed for 8 months. Kaisha had long, brightly painted nails. Every time she got a manicure, she spent $100. They despised these hands. They were ashamed of my scent of sweat and sawdust. But these hands and that sweat paid for the champagne they drank and the phones they held. Forgive me, Lorraine, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. I failed to teach them how to be human. But I will not fail to protect Isaiah. I washed my face with cold water. The chill woke me up completely. I looked myself in the eye one last time. The dullness was gone, replaced by a sharp, cold, firm gaze, the look of a man who has nothing left to lose. I pulled out an old handkerchief to dry my face. I adjusted my collar. I smiled. A smile I had never shown my children. The smile of a hunter laying a trap. All right, my dear children, I said quietly. You wanted to play Happy Family? I'll play with you until the very end. I opened the bathroom door, stepped into the hallway, and walked toward the false light of the living room. When I returned to the table, the atmosphere seemed less tense, or at least they were trying to pretend it was. Darius was fidgeting with his empty glass. Kaisha was checking her phone, but as soon as she saw me, she tucked it away. A stranger was now standing by the table. He wore a cheap suit that was a bit too tight around the gut. His hair was slicked back with too much gel, and he held a worn leather briefcase. He had the smile of a shark, the kind that eats carrion. Pops! Darius jumped up with exaggerated joy. I'd like you to meet Mr. Sterling. He's a representative from Golden Horizons. He came by personally at this hour to help us finish the registration paperwork. Hello, Mr. Washington. Sterling extended a hand that was sticky with sweat, shaking mine firmly. It's an honor. I've heard so much about you from your children. A great father, a great man. I guarantee you're going to love our facility. Hello, I replied, pulling my hand away quickly. Working this late must be exhausting. Client comes first, sir. He laughed loudly, then quickly snapped open his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. Time is money. I know you're anxious to get to your paradise, so I got everything ready right here. He spread the papers across the table, pushing the cake aside. White sheets filled with dense black legal clauses. It's very simple, sir, Sterling rattled on, pulling out a shiny pen. This is the long-term residency contract 5-year platinum package. Includes the suite, meals, medical care, laundry, massages, everything. Total value as well. It's an impressive figure, but young Darius here has already handled the deposit. Darius nodded repeatedly, his eyes glued to the file. That's right, Pops. You just got to sign as the beneficiary. The payment part is in my name as family representative. I took the file, feigning a squint. My reading glasses were old and scratched, but my mind was clearer than ever. I flipped through the pages, numbers, waivers, and then I stopped at the most important part, page 1. Section A, Service Provider, Golden Horizons Luxury Senior Living, page 2. Section B, Payer Guarantor, Darius Washington and Jerome Washington, co-owners of mortgaged property, page 3. Appendix A, Beneficiary Information, Patient. The line for name of beneficiary was still blank. They didn't put the name here, I said, pointing to the empty line. Sterling rushed to explain. Oh, that's just flexibility, sir. Since you're the head of household, sign the last page accepting the general terms first. We'll fill in the specific patient's name with a typewriter later makes it look professional for your VIP membership card. The important thing is that signature in the asset commitment section. I looked at Darius. His eyes were wide. He was holding his breath. He didn't care about the name on the card. He only cared about my signature on the mortgage section, so the contract would be valid. The proof he needed to give the loan shark that the house was as good as sold. Their greed and fear had made them sloppy. They wanted to do it fast. They thought I was a senile old man who would sign wherever he was told. There it was. The trap they set for me had a massive hole in it, and that same hole would be their grave. I see how it is. I nodded slowly. Technology these days, huh? So fast. Of course, Pops, Kaisha urged, pressing the pen into my hand. Sign quickly so we can cut the cake. Isaiah's getting hungry. I was still doubled over, feigning a loud coughing fit, but my right hand slipped like lightning into the lapel of my jacket. My fingers touched the paper I had prepared, the Appendix A with the name Isaiah Washington, printed in bold dot my left hand. Under the cover of the arm holding my chest as I coughed, slid over the messy table. I grabbed the blank Appendix A that had come loose next to the main contract. It was a little stained with wine on the edge, but that didn't matter. A sleight of hand move I had practiced 100 times in my head the night before. Snap, the blank white paper disappeared into my pocket. The paper with Isaiah's name appeared on the table, placed perfectly under the main contract in the same position, except I had smeared a little wine on its edge on purpose, so it looked like it had just been spilled on. The whole thing happened in less than 3 seconds. When Sterling looked up, his face red with anger, the magic trick was over. I was still sitting there, clutching my chest, gasping, with a face full of guilt and fear. Oh, I'm so sorry, I stammered, my voice cracking. The cough just hit me. I'm so sorry. Did the papers get wet? Darius picked up the file, shaking it. Some pages were soaked, stained red. It's all wet. You're a useless old, he growled, looking at the stained papers. Sterling checked with a grimace of disgust. Thank God the letters are still readable. It's just dirty. Printing it again would take too long, and I left the printer in the car downtown. He looked at his watch, and then at his disheveled appearance. He wanted to finish fast so he could go change. Whatever. He waved a hand. It's still signable. The ink won't run. Sign quickly, please, sir. I need to go wash this shirt. I held my breath. Would he check the appendix below? He lifted the first page, the main contract. He saw it was only wet at the corner. He nodded. He didn't lift the page underneath. He pushed the damp, wine-smelling paper toward me. Sign here. I smiled inwardly. His negligence and haste were my best allies. I took the pen again. The table was now sticky with wine and broken glass, but nobody cared about cleaning it. Their only goal was the signature. I put the tip of the pen on the damp paper. The dark blue ink marked the wine-stained background. Looking like a blood wound, I signed. Jerome Washington. The strokes were shaky, but determined. I signed the payment commitment page. the authorization to dispose of mortgaged assets, and most importantly, I signed confirming the file where the switched appendix sat underneath. Done, I said, dropping the pen and leaning back in the chair, exhaling long as if a weight had been lifted. My fate is in your hands. Darius grabbed the paper immediately. He stared at my signature like it was a winning lottery ticket. His eyes gleamed. Yes, that's it, he shouted, turning to high-five Kaisha. We did it. Sterling quickly gathered the papers, shoving them all into his briefcase haphazardly, not bothering to neaten them. Congratulations to the family. Deal's done. Transport arrives tomorrow at 7 a.m. sharp. Have the luggage ready. He left without saying goodbye, heading straight for the door with the haste of someone who just closed a deal, but fears getting his hands any dirtier. The door slammed shut in the living room. It was just me and my 2 children in the full intoxication of victory. Put on some music. Darius laughed loudly, pouring the remaining wine into the last standing glass. Tonight we drink till we drop. Tomorrow is freedom. Tomorrow we're rich. Kaisha ran to hug her brother. Both were dancing, spinning in the middle of the room, even stepping on the broken glass. They laughed a wild, shrill laugh. I sat in silence at the table, watching them celebrate over their own father's pain. They thought they had won. They thought they had plucked the old man clean. Ain't you gonna eat your cake, Pops? Kaisha asked, shouting in a mocking tone. You can eat whatever you want now. Nobody's stopping you. No, I said, rising slow and tired. I'm exhausted. I want to go lie down for a bit with Isaiah. It's my last night at home. Whatever. Darius waved a hand, his eyes still glued to the copy of the contract he'd kept. Don't bother us. I slipped silently out of the finished party, walking toward the dark corner where Isaiah was. The darkness swallowed me, separating me from the bright light and noise of those demons in my pocket. The crumpled blank appendix rested in silence. That was the proof of their crime, and the shield protecting my planned tomorrow. I just had to wait for tomorrow. The loud music and laughter of Darius and Kaisha continued until 2 in the morning. Then snoring like thunder echoed from the living room sofa. They were passed out drunk right there, clutching the file like it was a pot of gold. The house fell into silence. A terrifying silence before the great storm. I didn't sleep. How could I sleep when blood was boiling in my veins? I sat by Isaiah's bed. The yellowish streetlight filtered through the crack in the window, illuminating my son's gaunt face. Isaiah slept with difficulty, a whistling sound in his breath. In 10 years, he'd never had a truly restful sleep. This mattress was flat. The springs poked into his back. In summer, it was hot. In winter, it was freezing. I gently stroked his tangled hair. It was sticky with sweat. My son, I whispered, my voice breaking. Forgive me. Forgive me for letting you suffer all these years. I thought keeping you by my side was loving you, but I was only prolonging your pain. Isaiah moved, opening his eyes. They were clear, innocent, reflecting my aging silhouette. He couldn't speak, but I knew he recognized me. He made a small guttural sound. His contracted hand reached for mine. I took that cold hand and pressed it to my cheek. Listen to me. I leaned into his ear. Tomorrow, you're going on a long trip. You ain't going to some death trap facility. You're going to a beautiful place. There are gardens, air conditioning, and kind nurses who smell nice. They'll bathe you and massage you every day. You'll eat well. You'll sleep on a soft mattress. Isaiah blinked. He seemed to be listening intently. Your siblings, they don't need you, and they don't need me. But it doesn't matter. I have reclaimed justice for you. This house, my money, everything will be traded for your peace for the rest of your life. I pulled a carefully laminated old photo from my pocket. It was a photo of the whole family from 20 years ago, when Lorraine was alive and Isaiah was a strong young man, smiling on his new motorcycle. I tucked the photo into the pocket of Isaiah's pajamas. Keep this so you remember you were loved. And you always will be. I kissed his forehead a goodbye kiss, because I knew that after tomorrow I wouldn't have the chance to see him again, that my plan would leave me with nothing. I would have to wander to survive. But I would rather starve on the streets than let Isaiah suffer one more day of torment. Sleep, son? I patted his shoulder. Sleep to gather strength. Tomorrow you'll be a king. And me? I'll be your sibling's nightmare. I stood up, went to the window, and looked at the black sky outside. On the horizon, a faint strip of light was beginning to appear. Dawn was coming. The hour of judgment had arrived. The sunlight filtered through the cracks in the dusty curtains, illuminating the pile of empty bottles rolling on the floor. The whole room stank of stale alcohol and rancid food, a desolate scene after the victory binge of those who had just sold their own father. I had been up since 5. I was sitting in the old armchair in the corner of the room, the only spot that hadn't been stained by last night's party. I had shaved, combed my sparse white hair with a little water, and put on the best suit of my life. It was a charcoal gray suit I'd had made 10 years ago for Lorraine's funeral. It was a bit large for my now thin body, but I had tightened the belt and straightened the tie. Next to my feet was a small worn leather suitcase. Inside was no clothing, only a few old photos, Lorraine's Bible, and my shaving kit. I took a sip of black coffee that was already ice cold. The bitter taste numbed the tip of my tongue, but it helped me stay awake. I sat there like a statue, watching my 2 children sleep soundly on the sofa. Darius had his mouth open, snoring as if he were sawing wood. Kaisha was curled up, her makeup smeared, making her look like a sad clown. 7 o'clock sharp. Ding dash dong. The doorbell rang sharp, tearing through the morning silence. It wasn't the usual dull hum. It sounded crisp and decisive. Darius stirred, muttering a curse and covering his eyes with his hand. Kaisha also moaned, turning over, unwilling to get up. Ding dash dong. Ding dash dong. The bell repeated, patient but pressing. Open the door, Darius mumbled, kicking his sister. Probably just the mail truck. I stood up. The sound of my leather saws hitting the floor made Darius snap, one eye open. He saw me impeccable in my suit, standing imposing in the middle of the room like a ghost. What the hell? He rubbed his eyes, his voice raspy. Why you dressed like you going to a wedding? The transport is here, I said curtly. Get up. Don't keep the guests waiting. I walked to open the front door. A gust of fresh air entered the house. Parked right in front was not the dilapidated ambulance they had imagined. It was a pristine white Mercedes Sprinter, gleaming and long. On the side, it had a golden crown logo and stylized lettering. Premium Medical Services Golden. Horizons. 2 women stepped out of the vehicle. They didn't wear messy white lab coats. They wore custom-fit navy blue uniforms, polished black leather shoes, and communication headsets. They looked more like high-level professionals than nurses, tall, composed, with calm, intelligent faces. The lead nurse had warm brown skin and kind eyes. Her name tag read, Nurse Rodriguez, RN, MSN. Darius struggled to his feet, squinting at the door. Seeing the luxury vehicle, his eyes lit up. He nudged Kaisha. Get up. Look at that. The Mercedes came for the old man. Wow, quality really does cost. That's fancier than the mayor's ride. He staggered as he rose, hurriedly smoothing his hair and pulling up his sagging shorts. He wanted to look like the owner of that expensive contract. Morning. Darius walked to the door with a jovial voice mixed with fawning. Very punctual. I'm Darius Washington, the one who paid for the package yesterday. Nurse Rodriguez gave a slight nod of courtesy, but didn't smile. She held an electronic tablet in her hand. "Good morning, sir. We are here to execute the transfer order under contract number 09882. Priority code, Platinum." "Exactly. Exactly." Darius laughed happily, turning to point at me. "Here's the passenger. The old man's ready. There's his suitcase. Y'all carrying him, or is he walking?" I remained motionless, gripping the handle of my suitcase tight. I looked directly at Nurse Rodriguez without saying a word. Nurse Rodriguez scanned me from head to toe. Then she looked at her tablet, her eyebrows furrowing slightly. "Excuse me." Rodriguez's voice was professional and clear. "There's a confusion here." The smile on Darius's lips froze. "Confusion? What confusion? I already made the full transfer. Don't tell me I'll hike the price at the last minute." Kaisha had woken up too, stumbling over to stand behind her brother, watching with concern. "What's wrong? You ain't taking him?" Rodriguez didn't answer immediately. She slid her finger across the tablet screen, then pulled a printed sheet from her clipboard. "Mr. Jerome Washington?" Rodriguez asked, looking toward me. "That's me," I replied calmly. "You are the one who signed as the guarantor of payment." "Correct?" "Exactly," Darius interjected, his voice starting to sound annoyed. "Look, my dad pays, and my dad goes. The contract says it clearly." Rodriguez shook her head a flat denial that fell like a stone on my children's chests. "No, sir. According to the attached medical file and the beneficiary appendix, signed and confirmed last night, the patient we are to collect is not Mr. Jerome." She held the sheet high. The morning sun clearly illuminated the bold black letters on the white paper. Transfer order for patient. Isaiah Washington condition. Quadriplegia. Muscle atrophy, incontinence requirement. Intensive care 24/7 in the room. The space seemed to freeze. The birds singing in the yard suddenly sounded strangely shrill. Darius stood there agape, his eyes bulging as if they were about to pop out of their sockets. He looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. His alcohol-soaked brain couldn't process this information. "What? What in the hell?" He stammered. "It's a joke. Isaiah is my brother, the invalid. The one going to the home is this old man. He's healthy. He can walk." "I don't know what agreement you have," Rodriguez said coldly, with the tone of someone who just follows the rules. "But the legal documents are clear. Mr. Jerome's signature here confirms that Isaiah is the sole beneficiary of this life care package. We cannot admit a healthy person into the intensive care unit." Kaisha shrieked, lunging to snatch the paper from Rodriguez. "Let me see. That's absurd." Yesterday, clearly, her eyes scanned the paper. The blood drained from her face. The signature? "It is Pop's signature?" She whispered, her hands trembling. But where did this sheet come from?" "Yesterday, when we signed, she looked up at me, and in that moment, she understood everything. I was standing there, impassive as a stone statue. Slowly, I took off my glasses, revealing sharp, cold eyes that looked straight into her dark heart. "Hello, children," I said in a soft voice, dripping with absolute sarcasm. "I remember you said yesterday that you wanted the best for the family, right? Isaiah needs doctors more than I do. He needs air conditioning and a soft mattress more than I do. So I gave that spot to your brother." You, Darius choked, his face turning red with rage. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You cheated us? You switched the papers." "Watch your mouth," I interrupted him. "I just filled in the blank space you so generously left. You were too busy worrying about getting the signature to sell the house that you forgot to read who you were enrolling." The truth hit Darius and Kaisha like a sledgehammer. Darius grabbed his head. Stumbling back. No, impossible. 5,000 a month. 60,000 a year. That money is the price of my life. You dared to use it on that useless. He roared, lunging frantically toward me. The violent instinct of a cornered man woke up. He wanted to hit me, to tear me apart, to get that money back. But before he could touch my lapel, a firm hand blocked his chest. It was the second nurse, a tall black woman with an athletic build and no-nonsense eyes. Her name tag read, Nurse Patterson. RN. She only needed a gentle but firm push with one hand to make Darius stagger and fall flat on his face. Maintain your distance, Patterson said in a grave, authoritative voice. We have orders to protect the safety of family and clients during transfer. Kaisha stood paralyzed. Tears began to flow, smearing her already miserable face. She wasn't crying out of pity for me or joy for Isaiah. She was crying for the money. Daddy, she moaned, falling to her knees. You're killing us with this. The contract is non-refundable. You know that. If Isaiah goes, what are we going to live on? If you went, we'd have our hands free to do business. To sell the house? I smiled with contempt. You're still thinking about selling the house while your brother is about to be saved from this hell? Let him rot. Darius scrambled up, his eyes bloodshot. He's junk. It don't matter if he dies, but my money, my money. He turned to Rodriguez, grabbing her arm, pleading like a coward. Listen, cancel the contract. Help me, I'll give you a cut. We'll go halves. Say there was a mistake. Don't take the invalid. Take this old man or take nobody. Just give me the money back. Rodriguez brushed his hand away with professional disgust, smoothing her uniform where he'd touched. Sir, this is a legal contract with electronic certification. At the moment of signing, the money is already in the corporate system. Immediate cancellation carries a 100% penalty. And I repeat, we work under the law. She turned to Patterson. Where is the patient, Isaiah Washington? We need to take him immediately to comply with the morning treatment schedule. Darius collapsed completely, leaning against the wall and sliding to the floor, pulling at his hair with both hands. His mouth babbled senseless words. The shadow, the sharks, cut off hands, concrete. He knew he was finished. He had used money from a high-interest loan to pay for the home, hoping to sell the house and pay it back with a huge profit. But now the money was gone. The house hadn't been sold, and it never would be, the way he thought. And the burden he wanted to discard was going to enjoy luxury services paid for with his own blood. Money. It was an irony so bitter it was lethal. Looked at my two children writhing in the filth of the greed they had created. My heart didn't feel a single ounce of compassion. Compassion died last night when they snatched my phone. Go get the patient, I said to Rodriguez, pointing inside. He's in the corner of the room. Be gentle. In 10 years, nobody has carried him with care. Rodriguez signaled her colleague. They pulled a modern gurney from the back of the vehicle, complete with an air mattress and velvet-lined safety straps. They wheeled the gurney into the house. The wheels glided smoothly over the broken tiles. As they approached Isaiah, Darius suddenly jumped up. Desperation had turned him into a mad beast. Don't take him, he shouted, blocking the gurney. He's property. I mean, he's my family. I am the head of the house. I forbid you to take him. If he goes, I'm calling the cops for kidnapping. Rodriguez stopped, sighing with a look of professional patience, like she had to deal with a difficult child. She pulled a hard-eyed card and radio from her pocket. Sir, Rodriguez said, hardening her voice, each word delivered like a hammer blow. First, the legal guardian of Isaiah, according to the most recent documents. is our facility. Mr. Jerome, here present, signed the transfer of medical custody. She took another step toward Darius, her calm authority more intimidating than any shout. Second, obstructing medical personnel during the transfer of a critical patient is a federal offense. The penalty is 3 to 5 years in prison. Do you want me to call the police to file the report right now? The word police was a bucket of ice water to Darius's face. Kaisha rushed forward, pulling hard on her brother's sleeve. No, don't call the police. She hissed into Darius's ear. Are you crazy? If the police come, they'll check the papers. They'll see your debts, and Vance will know there are problems here. Those people hate when the law gets involved. You want to die sooner? Darius shuddered. He looked at the navy blue uniforms, the shiny badges on their chests, and looked toward the street. The fear of the loan sharks was greater than the fear of losing the money. If the police arrived, everything would come to light, and he would be hunted by both sides, the law and the mob. He gritted his teeth. His jaw tensed, but his legs stepped back automatically. He surrendered. Fine, he hissed through his teeth. Take him. Take that thing so I never see it again. Rodriguez gave a slight nod, not deigning to look at Darius ever again. She approached Isaiah with Patterson. I watched the scene. 2 professional women leaning over my paralyzed son. They didn't grimace at his smell. They weren't rough. Good morning, friend, Rodriguez said softly to Isaiah, her voice warm and kind, the voice of someone who truly cared. We've come to take you for a ride. They lifted Isaiah with delicacy movements, so expert and smooth that Isaiah didn't even flinch. They placed him on the air mattress. For the first time, I saw Isaiah's contracted body stretch out comfortably. They covered him with a pristine white wool blanket, hiding his old, dirty clothes. Isaiah opened his eyes wide, looking at the ceiling, then at me, that I approached the gurney. The pleasant scent of antiseptic emanated from the blanket, overpowering the damp smell of the house. Darius and Kaisha stayed huddled in the corner, looking away. They didn't dare face the truth, that the burden they despised was now being treated like royalty. While they were on the edge of the abyss, I took Isaiah's thin hand, peeking out from the blanket. It felt warm. Go, son, I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. I didn't say a final goodbye, because I didn't want those 2 to suspect my own escape plan. Be good over there. Daddy will take care of everything here at the house. Isaiah couldn't speak, but his eyes lit up with a strange look of peace. He knew he had escaped. He would no longer have to hear his siblings' insults. He would no longer be hungry or thirsty in the dark. Rodriguez buckled Isaiah's safety belt and nodded to me. We're leaving, Mr. Washington. The head doctor will call you to update you on his condition every Friday evening. Thank you, I replied. Take care of him, like he was your own family. It's our job, sir, Rodriguez said. And for the first time, she smiled a genuine smile that told me Isaiah would be in good hands. They pushed the gurney toward the door. The bright morning light flooded in, enveloping Isaiah like a halo. The white Mercedes was waiting with its rear doors wide open, like the gates of heaven. I stood in the threshold, watching as they loaded Isaiah into the vehicle. The door closed with a firm, soft click. The engine started silently. The vehicle moved, gliding smoothly over the pothole-filled street, carrying my precious son toward a new life. I watched until the car disappeared around the corner. A tear rolled down my hot cheek. It was the only tear of happiness in the last 10 years. I had done it. I had saved him. But when I turned around, facing the empty house and the 2 demons about to explode behind me, I knew the hardest part of this play was just beginning. The storm had passed for Isaiah, but it was spinning straight for my head. Darius was standing in the middle of the living room with clenched fists. eyes full of a murderous gaze. Kaisha was rummaging through her purse, maybe looking for tranquilizers or to call for help. "Old man," Darius growled, walking step by step toward me, his foul breath hitting my face. "The invalid is gone. The contract is closed. The money is lost. But I still have this house. Give me the deed and the power of attorney to sell it right now." I adjusted my suit collar, looking him directly in the face. It was time for the final blow. "The deed?" I asked in a voice so calm it was chilling. "I thought I told you already. Don't play dumb, old man." Darius roared, lunging to grab me by my lapels. His breath stinking of old alcohol, and fear hit my face. "Give me the papers right now. If I have the deed, I can still go to the bank to mortgage it. I still got a chance to move before lunch. Give them to me." He searched roughly in the inner pocket of my jacket, where I just pulled the appendix from, but his hand only touched another very thin stack of papers. I didn't resist. I stood still as an old oak in the middle of a storm, letting my crazed son manhandle me. When he pulled those papers out, his eyes shone with frantic hope. "Here they are. Here they are," he shouted, opening the file with trembling hands. Kaisha also pounced, peering over his shoulder. Her makeup-stained face showed obvious greed, but the smile on her lips died in just 3 seconds. What the hell is this?" Darius stammered, flipping the pages over and over. "Certified copy. Trust agreement. Why? Why is the bank's name here?" I brushed his hand off me, slowly adjusting my collar with dignity. "Irrevocable trust," I said, emphasizing every syllable. "You thought, because I was old, I was senile. You thought I knew nothing of the law because I just listened to gospel radio." I walked to the table and poured myself a glass of water. My throat was dry after this long performance. "A month ago," I began in a calm voice, as if telling a story to a grandchild. "Right after the day I heard you planning to put me in the home, I went to see the notary. I transferred the ownership of this house to a trust." "A trust?" Kaisha asked, her voice lost. "What does that mean?" "It means," I turned to look at them with a sharp gaze, "that legally this house is no longer my personal property. It has been transferred to SunTrust Bank for management with a single purpose, to guarantee the lifelong maintenance expenses of the beneficiary. Isaiah Washington." Darius froze. The paper slipped from his hand, fluttering down to the dusty floor. "You're lying," he moaned. "But you just signed the mortgage with the home." The paper from earlier," I interrupted, "was just an authorization letter for the home to collect from the trust monthly. It wasn't a sale of the house." And most importantly, I stepped closer to Darius, looking straight into eyes dilated with terror. "The trust clause states clearly, this property is totally frozen. Nobody can sell, transfer, or mortgage it in any form as long as Isaiah lives. And if anyone tries to invade or fails to pay for maintenance, the bank will immediately seize the house to auction it and use the money to care for Isaiah." The whole room fell into a deathly silence. Only the sound of the ceiling fan clicking over our heads sounded like the mocking laughter of fate. The trap had closed. It wasn't a steel trap, but a trap of paper, law, and meticulous calculation. I used their own greed to bind their hands. Darius fell to his knees on the floor, clutching his head with both hands, messing up his greasy hair. He no longer looked like an arrogant 30-year-old man, but like a spoiled child who had just broken the most valuable vase in the house. "It can't be. It can't be," he muttered over and over. "The house ain't for sale. There's no money. Then I'm dead. Vance is gonna kill me. He's gonna skin me alive." Kaisha shrieked, lunging to scratch at me. "Why did you do this? Why are you so cruel? You'd rather give the house to the bank than save your own children? I caught her wrist, my mason's hand squeezed hard, making her scream in pain. Save you? I growled. How many times have I saved you, Kaisha? I paid the debts of your failing salon. I sold the land in Decatur so Darius could pay his gambling debts 3 years ago. And how do you pay me? With a fake party and a one-way ticket to the morgue. I released her hand suddenly. She fell flat on the sofa. This house, I pointed around at the damp, stained walls, is the sweat and tears of your parents' entire lives. Your mother, before she died, said, "Leave the kids the fishing rod. Don't give them the fish." I was wrong to give you too much rotten fish. Now I'm using this fishing rod to catch a life for Isaiah. But Isaiah's already gone. Darius wailed, his face covered in snot and tears. He's living like a king. And what about us? You're pushing us to our deaths. That was your choice, I replied coldly. This morning, if you had accepted me staying in the storage room, if you had shown even a little bit of humanity, I would have torn up that trust agreement. I gave you one last chance. But you chose the money. So now learn to live without it. Kaisha was crying at the top of her lungs like a child, but her weeping didn't move me. I knew she was crying for fear of poverty, not out of regret. "Daddy," she sobbed, "the collectors are horrible. They're gonna come here. They won't forgive us. Cancel that trust. You created it. You can go to the bank and cancel it." Irrevocable trust, I repeated. It cannot be canceled. Even if I wanted to, the law doesn't allow it. Now the bank is the owner. Isaiah is the beneficiary. I and you, we're just hangers-on. That was my only lie of the morning. In reality, there were still complex legal ways to intervene if I really wanted to, but I didn't. I needed them to believe the door was closed forever. I needed them to face their consequences with no way out. Then we're gonna die, Darius moaned. Lying on the floor, staring blankly at the ceiling like a soulless corpse. Just at that moment, a sound came from the street. It wasn't birds. It wasn't a bus. It was the low growl of a large SUV engine, the sound of tires crunching on the gravel in front of the gate, and then the sound of doors slamming. Thud, thud, with force. The air in the room froze. Intangible fear seeped through every pore. Darius jumped like a spring, his face white as paper. He ran to the window, pulled the curtain back an inch, and immediately let go of the fabric as if it had given him an electric shock. "It's them." His voice was just a breathless whisper. "A black Escalade. 3 guys. It's Marcus Vance's enforcer." Kaisha covered her mouth to keep from screaming, her eyes bulging with terror. Both huddled together in a corner, trembling like rats hearing the meow of a cat. "Pops, close the door. Pops, call the cops." Kaisha whispered, digging her nails into her brother's arm. "Too late," I said, staying still in the middle of the room. "If we call the cops now, we all die. Vance doesn't like the law." Getting into his business. Heavy footsteps sounded in the yard. Clack, 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 the sound of military boots. Hitting the ground. Then a pounding on the door. Thud, thud, the old wooden door vibrated, shedding dust. "Darius." A raspy, crude voice boomed from outside, a voice that carried the sound of the streets, of violence and blood. "Open the door, you dog. I know you're in there. Your car's outside." Darius knelt, joining his hands in a plea toward me. "Pops, go out and talk to them. Tell them the money is coming. Tell them to give me a few more days. You're an old man. They respect the elderly." "Pops." I looked at my cowardly son. He was willing to sell me to a home, and now he wanted to use me as a human shield to take the bullets for him. I didn't borrow money from them, I said clearly. I didn't spend a cent of that money. Why do I have to go out? Because you're my father. He shouted desperately, tears streaming down. I leaned down to look at him. A little while ago, you said I was a burden. You said I was senile. Now this burden can't handle your problems. Thud. The kick at the door was stronger, followed by a metallic sound. They were forcing the lock. Listen, I said quickly, my voice firm. There's a back door in this house that leads to the alley. I haven't locked that door yet. If you run now, maybe you'll make it. Darius's eyes lit up. The survival instinct woke up. Run, yes, run. He scrambled up, pulling Kaisha. Let's go, fast. But where? We don't have any money. Kaisha wailed, stumbling. Anywhere's better than waiting for death here. Darius hurriedly grabbed the wallet from the table, my empty wallet he'd stolen earlier. He forgot it had no cash. He dragged his sister, running desperately toward the kitchen. They didn't turn back to look at me once. Not an apology. Not a goodbye. Only cowardice and fear enveloped them. I heard the back door open, then the sound of footsteps running, fading away down the alley. It was over. They were gone. The house now only had me and the uninvited guests breaking the door outside. Straightened my tie one last time, picked up my small suitcase, and put on my felt hat to cover my white hair. The front door burst open. Boom. 3 built men entered. They were tattooed, wearing black tank tops with unfriendly faces. The one in the lead, Marcus, had a long scar running from his eye to his chin. He held a metal baseball bat. He looked around the empty room. Then his gaze stopped on me. An old man, well-dressed, standing calmly in the middle of the mess. Where is he? He growled. I didn't flinch. Years of working on sites, facing accidents and crooked contractors, had forged a steel temper in me that my children would never have. He's gone, I replied with a strange calm. He ran out the back. He's probably at the main road by now. The guy with the bat frowned, looking surprised by my attitude. He stepped closer, raising the bat threateningly. Who are you? His father. He owes my boss $300,000. If he ran, then you pay. I looked him straight in the eye, the dull eyes of an old man versus the fierce eyes of a killer. Do I look like someone who has $300,000? I asked, pointing to the old, broken furniture around us. I'm the person who just cheated into selling all his properties. You're a step too late. This house belongs to the bank now. And the cash? He spent it all on gambling. The thug looked around, saw the discarded boxes, the smashed cake on the table, the air of desolation of a newly collapsed family. He spat on the floor. Damn it, he cursed. That dog runs fast. He turned to his goons. You two follow him out the back. He hasn't gone far. Bring him back by his neck. The 2 goons nodded and ran past me toward the kitchen. The leader turned to look at me, scrutinizing. And the old man, where you going? I'm going to find work, I replied, lifting the small suitcase. I got nothing now. I gotta look for what to eat day to day. Just like you. He looked at me for a long time, then lowered the bat. Maybe he saw something respectable in me. Or maybe he just knew you can't get blood from a dry stone in the underworld. Sometimes an unwritten rule is kept. Don't touch the elderly or women if it's not necessary, especially those who have nothing left to lose. Get out. He jerked his chin toward the door. Get out of my sight before I change my mind. If I catch your son, I'll send you a finger as a souvenir. Don't send it to me, I said, walking past him. Send it to Golden Horizons. His brother is the only heir to the Washington name. I walked out the door. The bright midday sun hit my face. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of dust and gasoline, but to me, it was the scent of freedom. I didn't turn back to look at the house. I heard the sound of things breaking inside shattering glass, the enforcers' shouts. They were venting their rage against the inert walls. That house, which held so many happy and sad memories, had now become the tomb of the past. I left it to the past. I walked down the familiar street. Neighbors looked at me with curiosity. The woman selling breakfast on the corner waved. "Goodbye, Mr. Washington. Going on a trip? You look so handsome." I smiled, tipping my hat. "Yes, I'm going on a long trip, Mrs. Parker. A very long trip." I didn't take a cab. I walked to the bus stop on the main avenue. Each of my steps was firm. I felt light without the burden of worrying about spoiled children, without the constant fear that Isaiah would be abandoned. I had fulfilled my mission as a father in the cruelest, most painful way, but also the most necessary. The central station was loud and chaotic as always. The sound of speakers announcing trips, people hawking tickets, children crying. I stood in line at the economy counter. No plane tickets to Paris or Rome, as I had once lied. I didn't have money for those luxuries, and honestly, I didn't want to go. One ticket to Memphis, I said to the clerk through the thick glass. Memphis, the blues city to the north. Dusty but always lacking labor. They say if you have health and a will to work, you never starve there. One way or round trip, sir? One way, I replied curtly. I don't plan on coming back. With the ticket in hand, I found an empty spot on a hard plastic waiting bench. I opened my small suitcase and pulled out the ham sandwich I had hidden since last night. It was a bit dry, but I ate it with relish. As I chewed, I watched the flow of people passing by. I wondered where Darius and Kaisha would be at this hour. Maybe hiding in some cheap motel, trembling every time they heard a siren. Or maybe they'd already been caught. Whatever happened, that was their life now. They were adults. They had hands, feet, and a very expensive lesson I had just taught them. If they survive this disaster, maybe they'll learn to be decent people. And if not, well, that is destiny. Cue Syrah. Syrah. I pulled out a phone, not the old flip phone Darius stole. That one had been dead for a long time. It was a cheap smartphone I had bought in secret. I opened the gallery. A photo of Isaiah, smiling in the Mercedes, appeared. He looked so at peace. I sent a message to Rodriguez's number. Thank you. Take care of him. The money will transfer automatically on the 5th of every month. Don't let anyone bother him. And I took out the SIM card, snapped it in two, and tossed it in the trash next to me. Bus to Memphis departing from gate 12. The speaker blared. I stood up, taking my suitcase. My back was still straight. My steps were still firm. At 70, people usually think about resting. They think about death. But I am different. I am starting a new life. I'll wash dishes. I'll sweep floors. I'll work as a night watchman. I'll do whatever it takes to live with these hands, calloused hands that never knew how to betray. I boarded the bus, choosing a seat by the window. The vehicle started, pulling out of the terminal and plunging into the heavy traffic. The Atlanta skyline faded through the dusty window of the road. The tall buildings, the neighborhoods, and the house I once called home. Everything vanished. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the seat. For the first time in 10 years, I slept deeply without nightmares. They say blood is the most sacred thing. But today I realized a more bitter, naked truth. Blood makes you related, but only loyalty makes you family. And my family now is just me and my son lying in a 5-star bed hundreds of miles from here. Those other two, they were just strangers who shared the road. For a little while, the bus accelerated, heading north toward the horizon, where the dark clouds were breaking to make way for an intense, brilliant sun. Thank you for being here and letting me share my story. If it touched you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling me what city and state you're watching from. I love knowing where you all are. If you want to support me even more, there's a donation link in the description. I share real-life stories like this every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular videos will appear on your screen. Choose whichever one calls to you. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over just because someone tried to write the ending without you.